How's it going, guys? So these are my Mountain Heath Dragons. These guys are absolutely awesome. One of my favorite reptiles I keep. And they're living here in this sort of fish tank enclosure I set up for them after I first got them. And they've been doing great in here, but I think it's time for an upgrade. So I just recently bought a new enclosure for them. It's a bit bigger. I'm going to deck it out with a nice rock background on the back. I'm going to show the whole process to you guys. So let's get started. So here's the new enclosure here. It's 900 long by 600 high by 450 deep. So a nice little upgrade for them, and it's really good because it's got the front opening doors, so it's going to make life a bit easier. And yeah, for this background I'm going to make a big rock wall there for them. Being mountain dragons, they obviously like climbing around on rocks and being up high, and it's basically their natural sort of environment. So we're going to set that up and I'm going to show you how I'm going to do that. So I just cut out this bit of wood for the background. This is basically going to be the base of the background, so I'm going to stick all my foam on there and then make my fake rock on there. I'm going to stick that to the back of the enclosure with some silicone, just in case I ever need to take it out. It'll be a lot easier than just putting the silicone and foam and everything straight onto the glass. So that's going to be my background. Let's get started with foaming. Alright, so we've got our foam. Let's start making this process. I'm thinking a couple of different ledges and for the animals to climb on, and then just some basic sort of scaping to make it look a bit more natural. So let's see what we can do. Dried now, and this is how it's going to sort of look in there, but still got to shape it, so let's do that. Alright, here we have it. It's all shaped now. It's basically like this big ledge here and this big one here. Everything else is kind of just some bumps. What I'm going to do now is put some mortar on there, which is basically just concrete and sand, and I'm going to mix in a bit of wood glue with that to help it all stick together really well. And I'm basically going to coat everything over, make it really more smoothed over so it looks a lot more like rock, and that'll be our base foundation, and I'm going to put something else on top of that after. So here we have our background. It's pretty much dry now. I've sprinkled some red sandy dust over it just to try and get some of that colour in there. But as you can see, it started flaking off in some parts. It's only because I put a really thin layer. But if you want just to use the concrete, you just want to make a thick layer of it, and it should stay on pretty well. Because next I'm actually going to be adding this stuff, this liquid sandstone. I found this at Bunnings. I've tried it a little bit on some other hides and stuff. It seems to be really cool. It's made from actual sandstone, so when it dries it's going to look like legit rock. So I'm going to put some of this on and see how that goes. Hopefully it'll look really good and be nice and strong. Alright, so there we have it, pretty much done. What I'm going to do is just stroke out some lines like that to give it that sort of layered look. But I think it's going to turn out pretty nice. I realised that spraying it down with lots of water really helped to spread it out more, and I definitely think if you're just going to go with this stuff, don't bother doing the concrete first, just do this on top. It'll make it so much easier. The concrete sort of stick to it as I was trying to spread it out, so it made it really difficult, but I still think it's going to turn out pretty good. And now that's done, I'm going to let that dry, but while it's drying I'm going to maybe sprinkle a bit of red sand on there around the area just to sort of differentiate the colours a bit, to make it pop a bit more. So yeah, there you have it. That is the Mega Treat liquid sandstone. Alright, so there we have it. It's pretty much dry. As you can see, it looks really cool. And it just looks like a rock, because it is actually made from the same thing as a sandstone rock would be, just with all the binders and stuff in it. So that's how it's looking now. And what I'm going to do, because it's quite a light colour, and where these dragons come from, it's not always a light sort of background they're on. So what I'm going to do is Actually put some darker brown paint on there, just a little bit to sort of mellow it out and sort of make it more like the dark rocks that are often found on. But for this stuff, because it is a desert gold colour, if this was for like an arid species or something like that, I would just keep it like this because it looks absolutely awesome. So yeah, let's put a little bit of that dark paint on and that should be about it. Right, so here's the rock background done. Put it in, stick it to the back. Alright, so the rock wall is now stuck to the back of the enclosure. You can see the sort of silicon bead all around the edge. It's actually completely covering it, so there's no bugs going to get behind there or anything. Okay, so the enclosure's in place now. We're going to start setting it up. I got the dragons over here in their old enclosure. I took everything out of it because there's a bunch of wood roaches in there, and I'm just letting them hunt them all down before they move, so I can get that roach population out of there, as well as some of the other bioactive cleanup crew. But yeah, they're in there. And I was a bit reluctant to move them because a few of these females are actually gravid at the moment, but one of them is actually laid and the eggs look pretty good, and she didn't actually dig a burrow, so I'm thinking I should move them into another enclosure where they have more room to sort of dig around in soil and stuff like that, so they can find a spot that better suits them. So the idea for this enclosure is it's actually going to be bioactive just like the last one, except I'm going to try and do it a lot better this time, because last time it didn't work as well as I'd like. So this time I'm going to put a drainage layer in. So we're going to do that first. We're going to add in some gravel and then a sheet on top to then prevent the substrate from going down, and then the substrate. So let's do all that now. So as you can see, there's my drainage layer. It's just some simple rocks and pebbles, and it's actually really shallow. It's not very deep at all. You can see the bottom of the enclosure in some spots, and that's basically because these animals are not a tropical species at all. So whilst they are sort of subtropical, they live on the coast and in the mountains, these guys, they're not going to get the sort of rainfall and dampness that a rainforest enclosure would. So it's just a little bit of drainage just in case it needs it, so the soil doesn't go stale at the bottom, as well as it's just good for aerating the soil in general. So just a little drainage layer, and then I've got this shade cloth sort of barrier I'm going to put over the top of that. Alright, so the substrate's in. I'll tell you guys what I put in there. Basically there's a few different layers here. So down the bottom layer is sort of my humid layer, where the cleanup crew can go if they want some more humidity, moisture and all that. It's sort of like a rainforest mix down there. It's got some sand, some coir peat, some yuki mulch and some sphagnum moss all mixed together and all dampened down, so it stays sort of moist down in that bottom layer. Then above that is sort of a mix of like some yuki mulch, sand and a bit of coir peat, wetting down sort of thing. Then on top I've sort of had a mix of this beautiful red sand that I got when I was out in central New South Wales a few weeks back, and I sort of mixed that with some more coir peat to make it more firm and hold some moisture a bit better. But yeah, just for that nice sandy sort of look on top, and mixing it through with that other colour sort of dampens out the red a bit, which is good because these guys aren't necessarily a desert species by any means, so they won't live on red soils. But their soils can be slightly coloured, and I think it'll be a really cool look. So, and it matches with the background quite nicely. So yeah, that's our substrate. Now the fun part comes. We get to set up all these rocks and branches and everything to give the animals hides and basking areas and everything. So that's going to be so fun. My basic plan is to have it essentially like their old enclosure, maybe like a rock stack, some branches, things like that, keeping it pretty simple. So here's a pretty important tip for you guys. If you want to put in rock stacks or anything like that, you got to make sure that the bottom rocks are supported, and you don't want any substrate layer between the rocks and the bottom of the enclosure, because if there's nothing between it except substrate, the animal could dig under it, the rock could end up crushing them and they can die. So what I do is I get some thin bits of wood like this, or just anything that can prop it up, and I can bury these right down at the bottom, and then I can stack the rocks on top of that, and it's a completely solid structure that the animals won't be able to move and get under and get crushed. So you want to avoid things like that, and it's going to be some good support. So let's put these in. So there we have it, moved all the substrate out of the way. It's right down to the drainage layer mat there, and we can slot that in there like that for the support, and just cover it back over. Alright, so there's the rock stack complete. As you probably saw from the time lapse, it took a long time because you really want to make sure those rocks aren't going to move at all. Everything's solid here, nothing's moving, lizards won't be able to move it. And yeah, I think it looks pretty cool. They got some little cracks in there they can go hide in if they like, and it's just a nice sort of build up, and that's where their basking spot's going to be, right about there, so that heat can sort of dissipate down the rocks and they can sort of choose their sort of temperature gradient. So yeah, now I'm going to add in some branches and other leaf litter and plants. I am in the future going to try and do some live plants in here. I just don't have any on hand at the moment. But I've got some other real plants like this one here, which I'm going to chuck in. And they're real, they're just not living at the moment. So yeah, in future I'll do that. But for now, let's get all this stuff in. Alright, so I think that'll about do it for our plants and sticks and accessories. So now what I'll do is actually cover the whole floor layer with some gum leaves and some other leaves I've got to give that sort of natural ground sort of look with all the fallen leaves and timber. For lighting in this enclosure, for UVB, I'm actually going to be using one of these Arcadia Mini T5 kits, and this is with the Shade Dweller bulb. So here it is here. I've actually been using this for a little while now on the Mountain Dragons in the outdoor enclosure, and it seems to be working really well as far as I can tell. Has some pretty good light output, and the animals have actually been breeding because of it and producing eggs, which I haven't had before, so that's super cool. The best thing about this one is that it's such a compact small size, so it can really fit into really small enclosures really well, puts out pretty much no heat at all, and so for that reason it's really handy. And for this enclosure I'm actually going to mount it inside to the roof, and so they can get really close to it if they want, because it is a Shade Dweller bulb and these dragons do like full sun. So I'm basically going to allow them to get as close to it as they want via the back rock wall, and they can basically self-regulate as they choose. Now this system does actually come with some mounting screws and mounting brackets and stuff, but I don't really see how I'm going to be able to do that in this setup, so I'm basically just going to rig it up myself. I'm going to use some little bits of wire, and I'm just going to sort of loop that around the inside here and up through the wire on top to secure it in place. Should work pretty well. Right, so there we have it in place. So you can see I just got those bits of wire sort of strapped around it, fastened up on top here, and got it all plugged in. What's good about this enclosure is it has these sort of access points here where you can put cords through and stuff. That's really helpful. But let's turn it on, see if it works. Oh, sweet. Nice, I like that. So these Shade Dweller lamps are 7% UVB, but that's at roughly 25 centimeters away. This basking spot is about 30 centimeters away, so from what it says on the box it'll be around 5 to 6% UVB, but that's why I have this rock background and the light close to it, so they can climb up that rock background, get close to that light and get more UVB if they require it. That's what's great about these mini T5 units. They're good for small dragons, small animals in small enclosures. Alright, all our lighting is on now. So we have the Arcadia UVB in full blast, and then next to that on the left I just put in the heat light. That's just basically a 75 watt light. That's going to get a bit of this rock up here for some hot spot, and then down there on the rock stack. So they have more options to bask, which is always good, especially having 5 animals in the same enclosure. It's good for them to be able to spread out, not just all huddle in one little spot. And then this light over here is just an LED sort of spotlight, and that's just for some more visual light in the enclosure to sort of replicate the sunlight, and it'll hopefully be good for some plants in the future. But then again, I might use some different lighting for that. Either way, I'm really happy with how it looks, and I've got a few little critters to add in there before the reptiles go in, so let's go put them in now. The little critters are actually my cleanup crew. So these are slaters, and there's also some springtails on here as well. So they're going to go in and they're going to help clean the enclosure, make it bioactive, if I can get them off. And I'll add quite a few of these in. So I've got a whole big breeding bin of them. I'm also putting in quite a few little darkling beetles, or the beetles that mealworms turn into, just because I have a bunch of them at the moment, and I may as well use them in here. They can be part of the bioactive system. I've also got some earwigs in there. They were in the old mountain dragon enclosure. So yeah, at the moment we've got slaters running around everywhere. We've got some darkling beetles, springtails, and earwigs. Absolutely awesome. So now the last step is to finally get the dragons in there. I'm so excited. So let's put these lucky little dragons in. If you're not familiar with mountain dragons, they're an Australian endemic species. They're one of the smaller dragons in Australia, and one of the smallest ones you can get in captivity. This is a male here. He's a nice red boy. And I've got 1 male and 4 females. And what's awesome about these guys is they're actually the most southern agamid lizard in the world, and the only agamid lizard that actually lives in Australia. The eggs incubate quite cool at around 20 degrees Celsius, and they're just awesome little characters, full of energy. They love eating insects, and they just make great captive display animals in my opinion. So let's put him in. I'm so excited. I got to get him in and then catch the other girls. So let's see what happens. So here's one of the females. She's actually gravid at the moment. The camera will focus. Yeah, she's nice and plump. See what she wants to do. Another one. Another girl. And one more. Right there. This is the fattest one. She'll have eggs soonest, I think. And look at that, straight up the rock wall already. How awesome is that? So this is a nice big enclosure for them. I love giving them a lot of space, and they're going to use it all, that's for sure. These guys love running around. They're pretty crazy little dragons. Once they warm up here, they'll be darting all over the place. So there we have it, 4 more small eggs. So the first bunch here are from the original girl to lay, and these 4 are from the girl in this new enclosure. I think that's kind of a seal of approval in this enclosure. And there's the 2 mamas right there on the rocks. The one in front is the one that just laid. And yeah, I think they're going to absolutely love this enclosure. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you found this video helpful. If you'd like to see more Australian reptiles, enclosure builds and much more, make sure you subscribe. Give the video a like if you liked it, and I'll see you next time.